Good morning, my friends and acquaintances. I am now going to go into part 1 of the Ranter's news of the day. Since starting this, I am going to try to cut down on my usual free-floating stream of consciousness, which takes a long time to bring out before I finally decide, I'm done doing this. So I am now going to try to limit myself to 30 minutes per part, but do 2 parts, so it's actually an hour, but it's an hour between 2 parts. And I'm going to break it down further and try to limit the topics that I'm going to go into. And I think for today, or at least for the first part of this, I am going to start with our beloved President Trump's inability to stay on message when it comes to gun control and background checks. You know, it's interesting that he can go right after a shooting and then say, oh, we need background checks. We need to... Universal background checks is popular. Everyone wants background checks. He did this in the last major shooting where he was actually sitting at the table with Senate and congressional leaders, and Dianne Feinstein was sitting next to him, and she was all giddy when he was talking about background checks, and he was challenging the Republicans on whether or not they're afraid of the NRA. And then Kevin McCarthy had to remind him of which side of the argument he's supposed to be on, and then he backed off on it. Well, you know, El Paso and Dayton happens, and so once again we're hearing from him, who's apparently hearing the reverberations of many people who talk about wanting background checks, universal background checks, and he's like, that we need them, that we totally need them. Well, yes, we do, Mr. President, you're right, we do need them. And then, after a few traded phone calls between him and Wayne LaPierre, where he himself called him, then he started to back off on the background checks. You heard him a few times in front of the press going, you know, we already had background checks, we just need to change a little bit here and there, but we already have them. So he's walking backwards off of that yet again. But I guess he got whiff of the criticism on that, and so now he's sort of walking forward towards that. I don't know about you, my gentle snowflakes. However, I just... not even grains of salt should you hold whenever he says anything. It is problematic to hitch yourself up to whatever he says, because you never know when the next time he shows up he might completely change his mind on that and leave you holding the bag. He has done this already on various other issues, and I'm not talking about, you know, in the past few years. I'm just talking about in the past few days, especially involving the economy and certain factors that go into it, where his administration and his officials will say, oh, no, we're not doing anything like that. And then he himself will go, oh, yeah, we're doing something about that. Yeah, okay. So, you know, if it was any other person, we wouldn't need to divine tea leaves to find out what he really means or not, because we would already chalk this up to someone not knowing what he's talking about and seems to be bending at whatever winds of influence is blowing. And for him, one of his strongest, staunchest supporters is the NRA. Now, whatever grandstanding he can do in front of the camera, it doesn't change the fact that once they tell him that this is not good for them, he wilts. He has done this before, he's doing it now. And again, he can say anything, but it won't matter if there's no action behind it. when he came out, like during the rallies right after El Paso, he talked about, building more mental institutions to help facilitate these obviously mentally ill people who are using guns to kill people. I have this meme. I think it's a Family Guy meme talking about checking to see if he's a terrorist or not, and it was a color swatch. And the top level of the color swatch, which is just white, peach, and apricot, which is the skin color pigmentation on the Crayola chart. You're not a terrorist, you're just mentally ill. So I guess he follows the same color swatch, I guess. But anyone darker than that, then then there must be either terrorists or, rabid, vicious, illegal immigrants committing crimes, or various other people who he'll talk more about in their crimes, like in Chicago or Baltimore, than they will actually talk about people who happen to be this skin pigmentation committing crimes. It's funny how that is, isn't it? But I digress. Now, wherever you stand on the Second Amendment when it comes to, owning gun or guns and feel like your rights are being threatened or not, those are not invalid arguments. I mean, people should have these debates, but when you're having these debates, you should be able to listen to each other, not just like, you say your piece, but then the opposition says your piece, and you're sitting there playing Angry Birds. Listen to each other. Find out if their arguments are specious, or they're bogus, or they're just, coming from a place of inexperience, or, stereotypical fear. Because that can happen too on the, in the pro-gun legislation side, is that there are people who have thoughtful arguments for putting on more restrictions or hardening up the universal background checks for valid reasons, but then there's people who just just are late for the party. They don't have any research, and they're just like, oh no, guns. That's scary things. Yet on the token, on the other side, is that people who are so paranoid, perhaps, of losing their gun rights, is that they will follow whoever is the voice that is touting it. Just because somebody is saying what you want to hear doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to follow through with what they say. My opinion on it is that I don't think the Second Amendment is in any danger whatsoever. And I tend to believe that the vast majority of gun owners are responsible gun owners. That they have one gun or two guns, 5 guns, 10 guns. They can have an arsenal. They can have a trophy case full of guns, but they take them out to go to the range. They take them out hunting. They take them out when they feel they need to defend their families. This is not. I don't think this is the same people that would take out their gun and go walking around Walmart, or just wanting to go to a McDonald's armed for no apparent reason, other than your conclusions is as valid as mine as to why someone would do that in front of other people. But when it comes to something like universal background checks, I have no doubt in my mind that the majority of people who own guns, and the majority of people that want to one day own guns, will pass the background checks. That they won't have something in their past or whatever that would prevent them from owning a gun if they already own a gun. But some checks have to be made. But you look back and these arguments, going back to, the tragedy with Sandy Hook, and the arguments for protecting the Second Amendment when it's not even being threatened goes to ridiculous levels. To the one of the sticking points I remember was where there was an actual argument on whether to allow people on no-fly zone restrictions to be allowed to carry guns, to allow people to purchase guns. You put them, they're on a list that says they're potentially a danger, but you still want them to be able to carry guns. I know this is supposed to be like some kind of principle where is that you don't want to limit the rights of somebody else because it might one day limit yours, but there has to be a case-by-case basis to this, because good people who own guns, as I said, I don't believe shouldn't have any fear of being able to purchase another gun or being able to register a gun. And there's a lot of nuances and little complex things that goes on with especially certain types of guns that are able to be bought. And so a friend of mine was telling me about these about the kind of the grading level between various types of guns, and how certain guns has a lot more restrictions, a lot more background checks, a lot more the need to register with the ATF on owning these guns, that they actually want heads up on knowing where these weapons are. That's an interesting concept for someone who doesn't own a gun, and seeing how there is a serious level that people are supposed to take it. But then on the flip side of the coin, when you see that there are some hardcore restrictions that are demanded on, then you look back at that Virginia delegate who went to a gun show in Virginia, and he recorded this on tape, on video. You can actually find the video probably on YouTube, because I saw it. And he was going through a gun show, and he was going to buy a gun, and they're more than happy to sell it to him. And then they asked for are you gonna ask me for some information for a background check? And he goes, what? And the gun owner asks, what? Are you a terrorist? And he goes, no. Well then, man, that's fine. Background check is done. There was a story. There was an article years ago I read about this minister who also had a gun shop, and this kid came in and he was looking to buy a gun, and they went through some of the background process, but the process wasn't done yet. But the kid was able to walk away with a gun. Hours later, that same kid went and shot up his family at a McDonald's with that legally purchased gun. It just makes me wonder how people will take any of this seriously. Yeah, you have to take this seriously. You have to do this. I don't know if this is a chore, or if this is a pain in the ass for gun shop owners to do, or not. But it is a matter of, these are... Guns only have one purpose: to shoot, to harm whatever it's trying to shoot at. And you want to make sure that the person who's behind that trigger is a responsible person that doesn't have anything that sends out red flags. And to the final point on this, when it comes to Trump saying that we need to build more mental institutions to house apparently these people who are to commit these mass murders, or about to commit these mass murders, because clearly these people supposedly glow in the dark, so you can tell right away, so you can send the white van out with the butterfly nets to catch them. So far, any of the ones that are living who did these mass shootings, who are in prison, are in prison. No one is checking their mental status or sending them off to an institution. And someone brought up a point about this, is that, you want to build these mental institutions for this, that's great, but who's going to pay for it? I mean, people complaining that their tax dollars is going to fill a pothole, or how dare they demand my tax dollars to go and do an after-school program for kids. But people will just clap when they hear him say that. Again, when it's at a rally, I don't know if they're actually, buying into what he's saying, or it's just entertainment. So, take that for what you will. But enough of that for now. Let's switch gears to another fine topic that our dear president is representing our country so well with, and that is his pouting over not being able to buy Greenland. Now, the story was always a joke. I mean, it was like something that was brought up in passing, but then I guess because enough eyes were on this nothing story, Trump runs with it, and Denmark catches wind on him wanting to purchase it, and Denmark says no in the Prime Minister's way, and so now he goes after the Prime Minister of Denmark, and he's not going to visit Denmark. He's pouting over how she didn't respond appropriately to him. This was disrespecting the United States, but how in the manner of her not yielding to his desire to buy Greenland. Oh, Lord. On so many levels, there is just lunacy to this. I don't know how his defenders, like in the media or in politics, tries to explain this. Trump-splain this to the rest of us who look at this as insanity. So he doesn't get his way in buying Greenland from Denmark, even though Greenland is its own sovereign nation, a client nation to Denmark. However, there is people on Greenland. There is a working local government on Greenland that represents them who are from Greenland. But I don't... This is one of those things of like, someone had a whim and wanted to do something on a whim, but being told no about that whim, and then all of a sudden they're like pouting, and no, I don't want to check it out. No, I don't want to check it out. No. And so now he doesn't want to go to Denmark. He shuts that down because of what she said. It's very inappropriate. It's disrespectful to the United States. This is not like how they treated Obama. We're not going to be like how they treat Obama. No one disrespected Obama or the United States. And I don't know about you, viewers, but just because a prime minister of a sovereign nation says no to our president means that we as the United States are being disrespected. That is just one of those flash moments of absolute ego and arrogance to claim that a president of the United States who can represent us does not necessarily mean that anything that is said about him is saying about all of us. And I don't know how much of a groundswell there was of support to buying Greenland. I think it was none, because that's ridiculous. We have our own history of the land grabs that we did. Not only that to forge the lower 48 of the United States, and most of that was kind of bloody and kind of inhumane, but there it is. But Seward's Folly for Alaska, and you look back in hindsight and say, yeah, those were all great. The means and manner of how we did it is god awful. Well, here we are. And Seward, who wanted Alaska, people were ridiculing him for it. But then, after a while, it became a sovereign state of the United States of America. And I guess we benefited from the Alaskan gold rush from that too. But if you're thinking that this is going to be in long term as beneficial as Seward's Folly was, that Trump's Folly of Greenland is going to be, no. It wasn't. It was never going to be serious. And this yet again just almost reinforces my theory that he does things for the attention, for the headlines, for you to ramble about and contemplate about, like I'm doing. Or you see the media going on and off about it and having their panels over it, while underneath, the stuff that actually does matter to not only us as the United States in terms of our everyday lives, but to the, let's say, to the idealism of what the United States is, what we are supposed to feel about the United States, the things that we say we would never see in the United States is suddenly happening in the United States. And some things that were a sin in our past that we said we were ashamed of and that we never would do that again, we are doing it again under this administration. But this time there isn't a World War II or World War III, for modern if it was, that would justify what we're doing to migrants. And as the great George Takei said, yeah, they had internment camps, they were stuck in internment camps, but at least the United States government wasn't separating children from their parents. So again, you don't know if this is all to be taken seriously. Like, this is actually, he seriously was now geared towards this, or this was just something, something floating around in his head and it caught traction, and so now he has to double down on it because that's a attention grabber. I don't know. I know that it's clearly a mistake that we should be, as a country, see our leaders not go to the other countries because of a little tiff like this. Insulting the Prime Minister, calling her nasty for, yeah, she could just say no, thank you. We don't want to sell it. No, she had to be nasty to me. When someone says something ridiculous, you can respond in kind. And that was ridiculous. I don't even know what we would do with Greenland. I mean, what is the assumption of what he would do? Turn the whole of that continental island into one big giant golf course? Put some hotels and casinos next to the increasingly melting glaciers? Or maybe while the glaciers are melting, he sets up like a water plant to send out glacier water and sell that, Trump's glaciers. I don't know, that might be actually too clever for him. So, in any event, that is the first of today's news I'm going to get into. The background checks, the back and forth on that, we could have seen that coming down a mile road. I saw somebody online praising Trump that he was going to get this done, and the Democrats wasn't able to get this done, but he's going to get this done. Oh, he's awful quiet now when Trump is now backing off on his vaulted word. Yeah, it's funny how the people who are Trump-splaining is now kind of quiet. And, you know, I'm sorry, I would comment, but I have to go this way. And the Greenland thing is just ridiculous. And part of that that temper tantrum he was throwing yesterday, front of the White House lawn, about Greenland, about background checks, about disloyal Jews. Oh, we'll get to that in the next part. Obama getting tricked by Putin. That's the only reason why they're not in the G8 anymore. Yeah, this has nothing to do with them, like, systematically invading Crimea and eastern part of Ukraine. No, it's just, you know, Obama was not happy. Do you hear what he says? I mean, do you actually listen to what he says? I remember during the campaign how people who were Trump apologists, who, whenever he says something awful or says something nasty about anybody, and people just like waved it off, saying, "Oh, that's just his way." You know, we knew this was coming, but you know, he's going to do this, and this for us, so we just don't care. You know, that's just the show. The show is getting old. We're 2+ years into this. This is no longer, you know, the unknown factor being President of the United States, that people were just saying he's going to shake this thing up. He's going to shake the whole thing up. Well, yeah, well, things get shaken. Well, either they settle, and then it just becomes another paradigm, or something breaks. And there's too many people at stake in our United States that an irrational, reckless shake-up, in the most general vague terms as I'm using, which is apparently what people use when it comes to defending him, people can get hurt. People get hurt from his frickin' rhetoric. We already seen that. And not just El Paso. There was a number of instances from campaign to president where his words and his actions inspired people to commit violence, to attempt to murder, to attempt to bomb people through the mail, to burn down a mosque. And none of those things he ever takes credit for. He never takes the responsibility for his words that can inspire somebody to commit an act of violence. Now, I mentioned this in my earlier videos. He does this. He reminds me of Homer Simpson's quote, where when things were going wrong in one episode, "It's everyone else's fault but mine." That's how he acts. Nothing's ever on him. If Harry Truman said the buck stops with him, that anything happens in the United States government, it falls ultimately to the president to respond to it or take responsibility for it. This president doesn't believe that at all. The buck stops nowhere near him. Alright guys, that is part 1 of my rant of the news of the day. Stay tuned for part 2, which will probably be sometime later today. This is the Ranter, and his urge to rant is rising. See you later.